Good afternoon, everyone, and a very, very warm welcome to all of you. And thank you for joining us this evening for the inaugural session of Thrive Talks. My name is Nilanjan Kaur, and I lead enterprise and institutional sales at Harappa Education. Um, Talent leaders today are acutely aware of the evolving work landscape and the urgent need for organizations to respond and adapt to these changes. Through the Thrive Talk series, we hope to create a platform for talent leaders across India to explore the future of work, discussing both challenges and emerging trends. Every fortnight, we will have a leading talent leader in conversation with Harappa's founder and CEO, Sresi, to discuss the importance of innovation, agility, and experimentation in workplaces to build high performing teams that boost performance and business and help achieve peak performance. Our topic for today's dialogue, and this is the opening inaugural Thrive Talks. We are very excited to present this topic. And the topic is retaining and motivating young talent in a post pandemic world. Our speakers will explore how organizations can find the right way to help their young talent with what they need to thrive in the 21st century workplace. And I'm very, very thrilled to introduce our speakers today. Our first guest for Thrive Talks, and I'm so excited to present to all of you, Anil Santhapuri. Anil is the Director of Learning and Development at CGI Information Systems. He is a result-oriented talent and OD professional with 18 years of professional experience in the domain of talent management, learning and leadership development and consulting. His career spans across organizations like Western Union, HCL Technologies, CGI, Mahindra Satyam, and iGet, where he has designed and delivered award-winning learning and talent initiatives. Welcome to the show, Anil. Sresi Singh
Thank,
is
thank you.
founder
Really
and
happy to be here.
CEO. Sresi Singh is founder and CEO of Harappa, a learner-centered institution of the future that is committed to delivering programs that drive transformative career success using Thrive Skills. Thrive Skills is an essential set of cognitive, social, and behavioral skills to enable individuals and teams to continuously succeed at every stage of their career and of their business. So, without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Sresi for the discussion. We are running this session across three tracks. So do feel free to post questions in the Q&A window throughout the session, and we will do our best to answer them all. Over to you, Sresi.
Thanks, Lanchan, and hi, Anil. Thank you so much for joining us today and for helping us kick off Thrive Talks, our fortnightly dialogue series, with you that we are so very excited about. And thank you to everyone who's joined us. We're really looking forward to Thrive Talks becoming a really important destination and important forum for conversations on anything related to talent. We learn so much from all of you, so please keep the questions coming. And obviously, we'll hear so much from Anil. As Nilanjan said, we will run it in three tracks, giving time for questions related to the theme that we spoke about immediately as we finish that theme rather than waiting right towards the end, because I'm certainly very, very keen to hear the questions and insights that you have. With that, of course, let me dig right in and take the first theme. Young talent in a post-pandemic world, and I think we are erroneous in calling it a post-pandemic world. That's, I think, our bad. We're living through the churn and the chaos and the changes and the disruption that the pandemic has brought, and we are very much in the middle of it yet, from a public health perspective, and I think we will continue to be in the middle of it from a workplace perspective and a talent management perspective. I think already it's always difficult to engage and lead employees, but now the challenge has become obviously changing work culture, changing work style, and managing talent that can come from anywhere and work from anywhere, which has become the second thing that we've added. So in our first theme, we want to speak about, and we wanted to pick up the thing of that, without that, on young talent, you can't escape of the concept of skills and the conversations on the variety and the range of skills that this changing landscape has made important that the young talent had. So let me begin by asking you, there is so much, and when it comes to skills, and I know you're a great reader of Thomas Friedman and, and all of the work that he's done, as well as some of all of the other authors, whether it's research from World of Economic Forum, there is just so many conversation skills. But one of the skill frameworks that you pointed us to from Thomas Friedman works about meta skills, upskilling, reskilling, and continuously skilling, I think was a really, really important framework. So I wanted to ask for you that when it comes to young talent and companies living in a pandemic world, what are the skills? How do we think about upskilling, reskilling, and building meta lifelong skills? And what are
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy, and thanks, Nilanjan. And really happy to be here on the Thrive Talks. So I think we're jumping right into the core of the topic, right? Upskilling, reskilling, and meta skilling. So, when we look at our younger workforce, and earlier we used to call them millennials, now we use the term Gen Z. I think when you talk about value proposition for any employee, we kind of use the two terms of how do we attract talent and how do you retain talent. And when you look at the younger workforce like millennials and Gen Z, learning, career prospects, the whole aspect of mentoring is a big part of how millennials learn. They like to look up to somebody, and also millennials also enjoy seeing the bigger picture. So if somebody can take a position of, hey, I'm not going to manage you from a position of authority, but from a position of being a mentor and keep giving you the bigger picture, you kind of retain them. And that's been the whole research around millennials anyway. So what I'm arriving at is the best way to retain talent, at least the younger talent, is through learning as an engagement factor. Learning for now and also learning for the future, so that we are investing that, because career progression for younger workforce is very critical. And as long as we show them that through the learning, could be reskilling, upskilling, or meta skilling, it's going to create them career opportunities. That's the best way to retain them. Because one thing pandemic has taught us, yes, different organizations have different brands and everything. Brands matter, but I could be part of any the top 10 MNCs in the world, but everything from home. So earlier when we used to interview people, we used to flaunt, take them to the offices, show the big offices, do the interviews and everything. Now you can't do. Everybody's practically using the same 2-3 laptop brands we use, sitting at home, Wi-Fi connected. So how do you differentiate of the value proposition to them? I think learning becomes extremely important considering the demographics of Indian younger workforce, and that's where upskilling helps them with being job ready to perform now. Reskilling helps them to be future ready in next 2 to 3 years. And meta skilling, we'll talk more about that a little while, actually helps them to be a lifelong learner, so that it helps them to set up a career for themselves. So if we position those three to them, then learning becomes a very strategic way in which we can retain members, especially the younger workforce.
So you're saying, and I wanted to really capture that because I think it's a great framework. So you think upskilling is in your role, that you upskill from, say, you work in accounts or you work in something else, and there's a new accounting tool or a software or a way of reporting that's upskilling in a job. Reskilling is that you reskill them towards the future where a new trend is coming, and meta skilling is the skills that you give them so that they're able to, as we say at Harappa, anyone can do anything, that they pick up the lifelong learning skills and skills that whichever job that they will do, they must do. And that meta skilling aspect is not as selfish from a company's perspective to give to young talent, but you're saying should be positioned as a great benefit that companies are giving to young talent, because every company would want to upskill someone in their team, because without that their work will not get done. And reskilling also to prepare the work. So but meta skilling is really the value that you can engage employees on.
Yeah, so all the three add value, because first I need to perform optimally in my current role. That's where upskilling is. Then I need to be ready for my organization and both for myself for skill of future. So I'll give an example. I'm a core Java programmer, and the whole industry is moving toward full stack development. So maybe I'm 80% of core Java I'm well, but that 20% I'm not doing good. So that becomes my upskilling learning strategy for its next 3 months. And me moving from a core Java programmer to a full stack developer is my roadmap for next 2 years or 1 to 2 years for me and for my organization. And then later, if I can build some meta skills like my ability to learn by myself, my ability to build resilience, my ability to deal with ambiguity, my ability to have some social influence, then I will do my beyond a point, I'll start doing my own upskilling and reskilling. Company doesn't have to invest in me, and that's the ROI for the organization. And this is where I think we need to be little unselfish and think of the industry also, because if you look at the World Economic Forum reports, in next 5 years, we're going to displace almost over 80 million jobs and create some new around 90 million jobs. And we can always say, hey, we're creating 10 million new jobs. But the point is, the existing workforce with the existing skill set are not ready for the jobs. So if we don't think from a perspective of the industry, the whole Indian ecosystem is going to get impacted, and maybe jobs will go somewhere else. So meta skilling is going to help individuals, help teams, help organizations, and help a thriving country like India, where we have so much of talent to tap into.
Yeah, and I'm going to come to which the skills are, but I want to ask you sort of a provocative question: that do young people or people generally love to learn, that they see it as an engagement? Because as a learning institution which works with enterprises and which works with employees of across tenure and across functions, one of the big holy grail challenges, for example, in online learning or employee development and training, has been around the fact that it's so difficult to get true engagement, right? And to get people on that learning journey, which always makes me think about the fact that this thing that we believe that learning can really be used as a tool for engagement, is it really true? And take an example from what you've done in the last 8, 10, 12 months, because of the conversation we were having about an actual program where you have seen this play out at CGI.
Definitely. First of all, I think there's a philosophical response to the question too. I know it's very provocative. So it was interesting. I was talking to one of my friends, and he said, learning is the way we define learning is a model, and that by the definition of a model, it's a hypothetical construct. So unless you can prove it, how do you know learning is happening? Like, we have so many participants attending today. How do we know they're learning? It's a construct. We don't know if it's happening for real. That's one side of the story. But also, if you take a very human approach to this, right from childhood, humans learn every second. Like, think of how we were at infants, then we learned how to talk, how to walk, and build the basic life skills, how to balance ourselves, walk, speak, and then basic life skills, motor skills, and all that. Right. So as humans, learning is part of our process. Now, where institutions like yours come in, where learning functions come in, is to set up a framework. Because learning, what happens is, when you use the term learning and development, I'm just kind of taking a 30-second digression there. Everybody learns, everybody grows, but they do it at their own pace. That's learning. But development is building systems and frameworks so that you can accelerate collective learning together. Because from an organizational context, it wouldn't help me, or in the case of CGI, when people learn at their own pace, because some could pick it up quickly, some will take a lot of time. How can we accelerate collectively through a series of systems and frameworks is development. That's what we call the functional learning and development anyway. So I think that's like the philosophical response to the question. So to talk from a very practical view, last year, this time, every year we onboard hundreds of graduates. So we go to campuses, hire them, we onboard, and then we train them for a couple of months, 2 to 3 months, to kind of get them ready to be working for our clients, because we come from an IT workspace. So last year we had a very interesting challenge to deal with. The challenge was, we had to ramp up our graduate students, and different students were coming from different colleges where the exam dates were getting pushed because of the COVID situation. And most importantly, we couldn't train them face to face. We had to train them remotely. So if you step back and see, we're talking about a 21-year-old who's done pretty much education in their hometown or the nearby city, and never seen how a CGI office looks like, never visited a CGI office. And we had to train them on some professional skills when they'll sit at their home. I mean, that's like the challenge. So fast forward, as I look back, all those graduates are trained, are integrated into business. We got successful, feedback. when I look back, a couple of things we did differently is for this specific skill set of graduates whom we onboard, we use an approach. We work with a training partner. We use an approach called the flipped classroom. And what we do is we don't treat them as kids who go through training, morning to evening in the hands of a trainer, but we treat them as adults who can solve their own problems, and they have access to resources and mentors to go for guidance. So the whole aspect of independence is taught in from day one. So they walk in or now in the training remotely, they're saying, what we say is, hey, by the time you finish next 12 weeks, you're going to build a web or a mobile app for this use case and host it and present it to leadership team from CGI. That's the problem statement we give them. And to get there, here are the resources, here are a bunch of mentors you can work with. And by the way, you're grouped into smaller groups where you'll work as agile scrum teams together. So we're talking about a 21-year-old graduate with zero experience working in agile teams from day one. And I've seen their presentations over the last couple of years. They can actually make any tenured agile teams who work in IT industry run for their money, the way they work together with teamwork. Teamwork is a meta skill, if you ask me, because if you have the work in a team, have a bit of social influence, then you'll learn other skills along the way, right? So teamwork, working in agile. In fact, the larger problem statement we said was, we want these graduates to learn, let's say, Java full stack or a .NET full stack from technical skill. The larger statement was, we said, we have to create an agile, geographically dispersed workforce. So these graduates who are out of college should be able to do that. And through the application of this framework called Flipped Classroom, we were actually able to do that in a remote way. Earlier, we used to do it in a classroom setting. To bring everyone together, they used to do this in a physical one place together. But now we've done it successfully in a remote setting also. So I think for me, the three key takeaways are treat them as adults, treat them as responsible adults who are accountable, and then give them the work experience. So when you put them in the flipped classroom, it's the closest simulations to how they actually work on a project. So every morning they have to do a check-in through a Slack app. So they check in, there are a couple of questions coming in, and then they have a stand-up meeting with their mentor and their group, and then they go for individual learning. Then in the afternoon they come together and do the collective coding, programming, and then every week they have to submit an assignment. And it's not like an assignment back in school where you submit a paper and you get a grade. There's iterations, just like a project work. So they write a piece of code, upload in the GitHub, the mentor will review it, and if there's some mistakes, they'll send it back. So I'll have to iterate again and submit. So it's like close, it's a close resemblance of how things happen in a workplace, and that has done wonders. And when you look at the ROI of the graduates with no experience who come out of this training are actually as experienced as 1 to 2 years of graduates with real work experience. Wow. And that has actually reflected in our billability also. We were actually able to bill them more compared to other grads. Also, third and most important is to redeploy them later on the first project. But these are the employees who are on the like a hot list. Every time there's an open position, they get pulled, so they're redeployed over time. So that kind of shows that this model is working. But last year was a huge challenge because we had to ensure it works in a remote setting also.
So I think you said 3 or 4 really, really important things that I just want to recap for myself and our learning at Harappa, and certainly for our participants who've joined us. One is certainly that they are young talent, are adults. So when you start building learning programs for them, don't let it be more of school, but let it be simulate the reality of the workplace as fast. And I think that's a really important design principle, I think, in creating a program for young talent. Nobody needs more of college after having gone through 16 or 18 years of education by the time they come to the workflows. The second is, the language around remotely connected, geographically dispersed, agile workforce was the language of IT, ITS, and global companies, but that is now the language of every startup and every company in India. We are all geographically dispersed throughout different in the same cities in India, right? So I think a lot of the principles for people who are joining us who are not maybe from IT, ITS, the fact of our being remotely connected and geographically dispersed is a reality of every workplace right now, whatever industry it is, and it was only about to be there. And third is simulate that whole assignment and teamwork and iteration, that there's no correct answer in your first attempt, and breaking that thinking is, I think, a really important design principle again.
Yeah, it's a growth mindset based approach, right? Because in any real project, nobody's going to get the code right the first time. Obviously, you want to improve yourself, but you iterate, right? So bring that flavor to work, so that. And the other piece, what we realized is, this is very interesting. The kids, the graduate students who work in the logical agile teams, if we put them in projects in the same agile teams in the same groups, their productivity went higher. So they actually carried the team spirit with them. That was another interesting learning.
Great. So lots of other benefits, and now the teams there, you are confident that in terms of course, they're more billable, they were billable faster, they're raising their hand for new projects. So like incredibly useful and valuable business metrics that this program is meeting. Are you also hopeful that they feel a certain way about CGI, and in terms of retention, they're also, because they've gone through this program like this, they are likely to be around?
Definitely, their engagement levels are higher, and the feedback we hear from them, we stay connected with them for the next 12 months. The performance levels are high. I mean, obviously, it's a very unique experience. So they are young, right? So the kind of stays. That helps them engage, and in their own community of those grads whom they learn together. They have a closer bonding. So it's working really well from multiple perspectives.
Sure. I know Nilanjan already has questions, but I'll ask one tiny question and then Nilanjan can come up with audience questions. What are the meta skills? We all keep talking about this. This has also become like age-old conversation now that, this education to employability gap, same skills, people need empathy, authenticity, all of that. Can we focus on three? If there are three meta skills that you think all organizations talk about and pay lip service to, but nobody is really doing anything about it in a meaningful, scalable manner, which are those three skills? Which are those three meta skills to your mind?
Oh, that's a great question. You kind of put me on the spot. So I think if I had to group them together, there's a leadership framework. I'll try to align it to that so that I kind of structure my thoughts. So there's a leadership framework which talks about private leadership, which is all about me, the sphere of me. Then there's personal leadership, when I do one-on-one interactions with people. And there is the public leadership, where I interact one-to-many. I really like the framework because it shows all the three spheres. It's called leadership, but it pretty much for everyone, right? Any professional. So I think at a private leadership level, which is, when you look at 7 Habits from Franklin Covey, they talk about having a daily personal victory. I think at a private leadership level, growth mindset is a big one. My ability to learn, ability to learn from mistakes. That's the starting point. And you can further break down. There's a lot of research these days on curiosity, how curiosity enables growth mindset. I think the whole theme of growth mindset, learning to learn, is from a private leadership perspective. Because if I carry a fixed mindset saying whatever I had to learn, I learned in the college, then I'm going to struggle, right? And I mean, when we have time, we'll talk, but I'm actually a mechanical engineer by education, worked in IT for 5 years, and then switched over to HR and learning with no formal certifications. I kind of changed careers, so learned along the way. So I think first meta skill is, you call it learning mindset, growth mindset, doesn't matter. It's about me. It's Peter Senge uses the phrase personal mastery. Each one of us are being on the journey of a personal mastery. That's like the first one. The second one I would say is ability to solve problems. You could call it problem solving, you could call it critical thinking. These days, in a post-COVID world, there's a famous phrase called, solving wicked problems. We have so many wicked problems to solve, right? So there are various grades from critical thinking to problems to wicked problems. Innovation also kind of fits there. But the whole ability to critically think, even when there's abundance of information or even there's no information, is like the second. I think the third one is, in the sphere of emotional intelligence, your ability to be self-aware, ability to be flexible, bring in resilience. Because if you do those three, obviously you're going to impact people around you. Because if I'm able to manage my emotions well, and then I have the ability to flex based on the situation, then automatically I'm going to influence people around me, do a bit of social influence in a positive way. So emotional intelligence, the broader context also, is a foundation of leadership, because social influence drives leadership, right? So I would say that's broadly, I would say those three are the spears. There are a lot of topics in each one of it, but growth mindset, critical thinking and problem solving, and emotional intelligence are the three.
Growth.
Yeah.
Perfect. Growth mindset, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence are the three meta skills that everybody needs to start actually implementing on. And you mentioned Wicked Problems. That's from David Epstein's book Range, which I consist,
Yes.
I think everybody, every talent custodian should read that book. It's so profound. Nilanjan, over to you. And sorry but I'll combine the next two tracks so that we can manage the time.
No, I think that's fine. And so thanks for this. Couple of questions, and very interesting questions actually. The first one and the second one is kind of a follow through of the first one. What kind of innovative strategies can be adopted for retaining and motivating employees across service sector employees? So I think this question has come from people who are working in service sectors, and the service sector we know has gone through a bit of a hammer under the hammer for the last 12 months. If there is one industry that's really got hampered, was the service sector, right? So I think this first question is more on that. And maybe as a follow through of that, the second question was, is there any specific organization that has adopted simulated learning as part of their post-COVID HR strategy? So those are the two questions that has come up as part of track one. And I thought I will pose both of this, and then we can get an answer for this.
Thank you. I think great question. So I'll do my best here. So I think, generally meta skills stay the same across industries, but there could be some unique things. Like when you look at service sector, the first thing which comes to my mind is, we need to have ability to demonstrate customer obsession and actually drive innovation based on customer feedback. So design thinking is the first thing which comes to my mind. To have the ability to, apply design thinking to understand, empathize with our customers and make their entire customer journeys easy. The whole idea there is to map their customer journey and make it easy. And I think once we break down to that level, you kind of cut the barriers of industries, because I could look at a customer journey walking into my whatever is my industry in service sector. The same customer journey map I could actually do for an employee whom I onboarding or employee whom I training. So the approach is the same. But I would say in a service sector, I think start with customer obsession and start with customer and see where it's going. But to do that as an organization, you need to empower your employees. I know this story from one of the famous five-star hotels out there, where every person who was tending to guests was actually given an empowerment to spend up to 5,000 rupees to please the customer staying in the hotel. So which means if I was kind of taking care of my guests on a certain floor, I could give them a bouquet, order a free dish. If I saw kids, maybe get them a toy. So I need to feel empowered to bring that customer obsession to life, right? If for every rupee I have to go back and take permission with my boss or supervisor, that's not going to work. So first start with customer obsession, plot customer journeys, identify their pain points, and then empower them to some extent to kind of innovate. And when you work closely with customers, you kind of co-create. Right? So that's my first response. And the second one, I think the question you said was, in a post-COVID world, what simulator learning are we doing? Is it? And is it specific to any industry or?
No, I think the question was more specific to if there is any company or any industry that has taken up simulated learning more in the post-COVID area.
I think there are quite a few examples. Like I know, organizations in manufacturing industry use AR, VR very heavily. In fact, right in Bangalore, there are a couple of manufacturing companies. They have huge setups in AR, VR. I've even spoke to few talent managers from few organizations up north where they use AR, VR to onboard members. So imagine you are part of a huge campus and you are a new member who joins in. Instead of just doing earlier they used to call it the field trip or a tour of the office. Right now they give them the mobile app, the app with the AR, VR, and you do your own thing. There's a bit of that happening. coming to CGI, we actually use something called VAC, Virtual Assessment Centers, where what we do is we do, these are called situational judgment questions. So let's say there's a role of a first-time manager. So what happens in a virtual assessment center is in a 60 to 90 minutes duration, it simulates 2 to 3 days of work. At work as a manager, and in the simulation, I'll have an inbox where a requests come in, mails are coming in, I have a project and a team, and under stress, from a time perspective, what type of choices do you make? We kind of put them through. These are called virtual assessment center based on situational judgment, and we map it to competencies we need, and it gives a lot of input. So before we do group learning for our, let's say, first time managers, we put all the first time managers through the situational assessment test and see which competencies they demonstrated well, which they did not demonstrate well, and then we tweak the development journey like that. So at CGI, we've been using those virtual assessment centers for our very senior leaders, VP and above. We actually run a day-long. It's called a day in a life of. So in 8 hours, they'll actually run a hypothetical company for 4 years, and then it tests their skills at the CXO level in an unknown industry, in the unknown context of running a new company. So we do that for our very senior leaders also. It's a full day 8-hour simulation. So we kind of do that at CGI too. Hopefully that helps you.
No, yeah, absolutely, that helps. Maybe Tracy, back to track 2, and if you want to kind of start track 2 and maybe track 3 as well.
Sure, no, I'll try and combine the next 2 tracks. So they're very similar conversations. Thanks for those responses, Anil. In track 2, I wanted to step away a little bit from learning and also talk about this question of motivation, right? Because I think we are talking about young talent, and I think now it's more Gen Z, which is young talent, than millennials who are possibly reaching, 35, 40, depending on which definition and time limit of millennials one chooses. And nothing has been changed. Nothing has obviously changed the question of motivation and what becomes important for people. Then a time like this, where so many of us have been forced to reset priorities and experience a very different kind of life, right? But even before, there's been so much research that younger employees need brands to seem more authentic and seem more purposeful, right? That's one thing. They want much better relationships at work. And then, of course, money isn't the only thing. I don't believe that people don't care about money, because anyone who's going through a performance appraisal cycle will know that that's also not true. But I think money is not enough to certainly do. It's a necessary condition, but certainly not a sufficient condition for motivating people. And so I wanted to get into a conversation to understand how are you doing that now when people don't want to come to the workforce? The fancy offices, especially in IT is full of kinds of frills and perks of gyms and laundry and food. All of that is gone. How do you motivate young people?
I think that's a brilliant question. Thanks for asking. So I think, I kind of use this 3E framework to explain how there's been a shift pre-COVID and post-COVID. So earlier we were all obsessed with employee engagement. We still are. Most companies run employee engagement surveys, and they're pretty standard, typically based on the Q13 from Gallup, so on and so forth. Then over the last couple of years, there was a lot of, forward movement on employee experience, which is, I think, whenever we become too process oriented, we have to focus on the customer, so we can bend this side, right? So design thinking played the role, and then we started plotting about employee journeys, customer journeys, and how to make things easy for them. So engagement, then experience. I think now is about energy, because people are having very foundational, purposeful questions, and young people need jobs. So I think, but generally, from a workplace, why should I be doing this in the middle of a pandemic? Do I really need to work? Is there a real meaning to it?
And who cares about one missed deadline? All starts seeming small.
Yeah, it starts seeming so small, and then motivation, right? Coming to your question. So I think that's the big shift. So how do we kind of tap into that energy? And then when you look at that, it becomes a very interesting conversation. And I'll share my own personal experience. So midway through the pandemic, I was having conversation with my health and wellness counterpart, health and wellness leader at CGI, the CSR leader, and then HR business partners. One of them is on the call today. And we were like, we came together to see what all we were doing in a pandemic situation, and then all that was contributing to tap into the energy of the employees. So CSR, if you'll not believe, so there are 4 types of contracts at work, and I'll start with what you're saying. So one is the monetary contract, so which is how much I paid, what I work for, which is very obvious, it's in the offer letter. Then there is the social contract. What's my identity? How am I connected to the organization? Then there is the development contract. Am I developing what? How is it contributing to my personal mastery? And the fourth contract is value contract. What value is this bringing back to me, short term and long term? So we always focus on monetary. It's easy because initially we give an offer, but then when you look at from the other side, the development contract, the social contract, and the value contract, and when we came together, it was a big aha moment for me, saying CSR was playing such a huge role at CGI. Our members were stepping out in pandemic to distribute PPI kits, go and help orphanages, and that was connecting. And they're doing it in the local communities, but that was connecting them as an identity back to the organization, social contract, right? And still through the pandemic, helping our clients succeed, value contract, and then putting them through relevant development experiences, development contract. Hey, I'm growing, I'm getting Azure certification, I'm getting this certification. So I think it all together then kind of engages. Then health and wellness is also so critical. Like, now mental health is such a topic by itself. We need to help people, take care of their anxieties and and leaders and managers need to spot the symptoms. So there's so much happening there. I think if you focus them as a whole person, and kind of look at it from these 4 perspectives, then there's a better chance of tapping into their energy. That's a good starting point. But again, going back to your question, there's always an external motivation and internal motivation. Now, we should always find a way into what are the internal motivators for people. I'll give 2 examples. So when we onboard our members at CGI, and every company does this, we have a session on our core values, right? Every company has core values, and we talk about our core values. We have the posters and everything, right? So what we do at CGI is we help first, before we go to the organizational core values, we help our members identify what are their personal core values. We do a short activity from our institute, there's a core value institute. We ask them to identify the top 3 values through which they define themselves as a person. And for most of them, 98-99%, this is the first time they're articulating it that way. Education system of 18 years, we do a bad job with that. Because your values define who you are, how you act under stress and everything, right? And then it's a very simple but powerful activity. I've done this over many years, and each time it gives me goosebumps. Is then after people identify their core values, I ask them to do a simple thing. List the company core values on the left-hand side, list your personal core values on the right-hand side, and do matching. So in what ways can you bring your personal value to role model company's core value? And inevitably, everyone will have at least 3 to 5 mappings. Then the underlying statement is so powerful. Then we say, we don't want you to be somebody else at work. Be yourself and still role model. And that's when the internal motivation kicks in, saying, hey, I'm being welcomed as who I am. And the more I'm being who I am, the more I'll live the core values of the organization. When you put it that way, it gives them, the freedom to express themselves, and that does wonders. So it kind of triggers the internal motivation better, right? Another example I'll take is recently during pandemic, we have done this for one of our business units. We rolled out a learning culture assessment, organizational culture assessment based on Peter Senge's model. And we tried something different, which at least I have not done before, is to do what types of different learner personas we have in that business unit. We always do design thinking personas. So we had questions like, what are your triggers for learning? Under what conditions do you learn better? And why do you actually learn? What rewards are you seeking for? What are your incentives? It's very interesting to see that when you define these personas of what motivates them. Some want to learn because they want to get certifications. Others want to learn when they're pushed to the wall. And others because they like learning. Then you have this 3 to 4 personas. Then you know how to kind of, present learning to them. It's again understanding what are their internal motivations, right? So we should start with a broader 4 contracts and engage them from different, but eventually get down to a level where we help them identify their internal motivations, because once you have figured out what motivates somebody internally, then they don't need any other motivation, right? They're on their own. So hopefully that
No, I
helps.
think you
Yeah.
said I think you've said some really, really beautiful things. And you're a man after Harappa's heart, because we love frameworks also. And I love the framework of employee engagement, employee experience, and employee energy. And I think energy can sort of really be the differentiator between somebody, who's really part of the team and not. And also your 4-prong model of then monetary, social, development, and value. I think very, very useful. What you're saying about motivation, to connect it back to the motivation problem, and a lovely experiment on that personal core value or whatever, is first understand what each person's motivation is, because we think about the company has to motivate people by doing something or the other, but the fact is this can't be, the activities can be systemic, but there will be different motivations at play. So the first thing is understand what the motivations is even before you can start motivating them, which is this. And you're right to say that for many people, and I think in that sense, I really do think of enterprises and corporate L&D to be talent developers for the country, because I think some of this kind of conversation actually never happens in the formal education systems. It only happens in workplaces, right? So you're no different from a faculty or whatever in higher education or in school. And this thing about learner persona, so this asking what motivates and understanding the variety of motivations that are there, then being able to address the variety of motivations, I think is a really, really important point. I'll match one framework of mine to all of the lovely frameworks that you've thought about. I was reading in an HBR article, which really made sense to me. It's the 3 C's. You had the 3 E's, I have the 3 C's, which is career, community, and cause, right? Which is, what is this job doing for my career? Right? I feel like a part of the community with the shared, goal, right? And is this cause worth it? And I think it's so true, because nobody wants to just come and have fun at work. Smart people want to feel like they're learning and they're growing. And then because they're learning, they're having fun while doing it in the community they're part of. And both of that together meaningfully adds to the cause that the company or something can talk about. So I think I would, for all the talent leaders here, think about how people will improve on their career, community, and cause. But I'm going to bring back to, again, sort of, pushing the difficult question here. Companies and, C-suites, talent leaders, talent custodians can come up with, you can control that first activity of the core value you did. You can get mapped, which I'm sure is a great aha moment for an individual that they'll remember forever, right? It was the first time they've done it. But really, motivation breaks down between an individual and their direct manager, right? And it is in that space of that conversation of 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whether through a structured performance appraisal process or everyday kind of conversations that you're having, how are we ensuring that everyday conversations and line managers and business managers, in fact, get trained most, so that they can work with the young talent, and in what should be happening in those conversations, and are they happening correctly?
No, that's a very loaded question, and again, it's something very close to my heart, because those are the real wicked problems we're trying to solve, right? So
Yeah.
I'll take a very systems thinking approach to this. So again, see, people have their individual learning curves. People are learning individually, like many learning functions out there, just like CGI, we train hundreds and thousands of people. People are picking up their individual skills, could be technology, could be behavioral. But the question you asked is very important. Is it actually translating to team learning? Is it actually translating to learning in the flow of work? And some of it does, some of it doesn't, and there are many barriers to it. So there's that's why there's this whole, from systems thinking, those whole shift of moving from learning, moving from organizational learning to being a learning organization. Because in organizational learning, you're training people. It's like a factory, right? You have calendar programs, you have blend learning, you're churning out thousands of people. But it's like our education system. But a learning organization learns by itself, and for that to happen, there are three factors which enable it. The first is, I need to have individuals need to have a personal mastery. The whole group mindset, right? That's the first factor. The second factor is we need to have the right policies and practices which drive learning, and that was one of your specific question. And the third is we need to have the right leadership support. If we have these three enablers, then the learning organization happens. So personal mastery, you kind of is the starting trigger, right? That's where you trigger off through their core values or figure out their internal motivations, put them on the path. But then there are a lot of organizational barriers. So that's where the second one, which is practices and policies. We all have education and training policies, but what are our actual practices? What does actually really happen? We have this wonderful, all of us have this wonderful feedback framework. But what's the actual practice? Does the manager really give feedback to the member, right? So there's always be a gap between the policy and the practice. So what are those key practices which will enable learning? We need to bring, and this is the kind of work we're doing in one business unit I mentioned, where we're doing this work, where we kind of evaluating. So building practices, and then third is having a right leadership support. The leadership should really invest in the talent. So only when you have these three, you will actually translate any learning to organizational learning. Or there's a lot of drop, right? People finish certifications, people get this wonderful badges, they post it on LinkedIn and Facebook, but doesn't contribute to the organization. So I think it's a real challenge, and different organizations are at different level. We are, as I mentioned, at least in one business unit, trying something very unique where we found in the phase of personal mastery, people are more bent towards formal learning rather than informal and self-learning. We have a lot of leadership support, but we saw the gaps in practices. That's where we're going back to our drawing board to say what are the core 3 to 5 practices. For example, coaching. We all talk about coaching, and you kind of spoke about the gap actually between manager and team member. We all know coaching needs to happen in the organization, right, to empower people. But what we need is not a formal career or goal setting kind of coaching, which is also needed. Like, once a quarter I meet you, once a month I meet you. What we need is a conversational coaching. Absolutely. So what we're trying to do is identify the 5-6 triggers in the conversations between teams where there's an opportunity to pause and coach. Kind of taking that approach, saying what are the 5-6 triggers of conversational coaching, and then ask simple questions like, simple questions like start, stop, continue. We don't need great models there, right? But we need the mindset, and that's where just this ability of a manager to ask these questions and let the team members engage is the first step in team learning. Because unless team learning happens, I will, what I learned stays with me, right? So I think it's a long journey. Different organizations are at different levels, and like any other organization, I'm a huge proponent of agile approach. So start small, start a pilot, make it successful, iterate, and grow big. So that's what we're trying to do with one business unit. But you are really true. The way I can kind of circle the whole thing is, it sounds very rhetorical, but we ask a lot from our managers, right? In a modern organization, we always say manager is the missing link. Yes, that's true. Gallup has proven it. Everybody's proven it. We ask a lot of our managers. Now, the most important question which we don't ask is how much development are our managers getting? It's a very human approach, right? If you come to me and say, hey, I mean, you need to coach your team every day, it's part of your job. The first question I naturally as a human comes to my mind is somebody coaching me? Is my manager coaching me? Why should I give a benefit to somebody which I'm not getting? So I think we need to, therefore, from a talent perspective, as a talent custodian, and what we've been doing at CGI is also exactly this. Over the last 3 years, we've been heavily investing in our leadership and managerial development. Significant investment, because if they are not ready, we'll never scale it to the rest of the organization. So we need to give everything to our managers which we want them to do to others, and start right from the top. And it's a multi-year agenda. It doesn't happen in a day. So
yeah. So, but I think it's so right to get to the young talent and to be able to motivate the young talent. You have to motivate the young talent +1 and young talent +2, because sort of that motivation happens not through 6 monthly performance appraisal cycles and whatever ratings and increments people get, but in the everyday conversations. And I think the point about coaching, if somebody wants to take a practical out of this point about coaching, and I did a coaching certification just in the beginning of the lockdown, really because I wanted to experience how is it to be an online learner, for an intensive program. And it was so simple. The grit that they show was essentially you have to ask questions and not tell, so that you don't assume, and you don't look at the past, but you look at the future, right? So looking at this future, looking for a solution and asking questions around whatever, and deepening the why. Those are the two things I remember from my coaching center. They've been so important what you do. I also want to bring in the fact is one has to also empower managers, and it's a lot of skill and flair to have the difficult conversations. You had your 3 meta skills of growth mindset, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence. The meta skill I'll always add to everyone, especially who's a manager, is difficult and contentious conversations, that you can't shy away from that. You have to get, because I think what's happening that I see in a lot of companies, and it's a true, because we want to retain young talent and we want to grow them, and we need to do that there is this concept called ruinous empathy, that you almost over empathize with them. But smart people in your charge and smart young people in your charge need to also be pushed by you, right? And need to also be told that, listen, you can't be doing this. But sometimes, and young talent will have managers who are first-time managers. There is, are over-appraised, are over-complicated, but eventually it seems very nice at the moment, but it ruins their growth.
You're so right. You're so right. I think what they need is also radical candor. So it's almost like,
Absolutely, it's like from Kim Scott's book.
Yeah. Can I tell you? It's like, can I tell you what's wrong with you without disrespecting you as a person, right? So
Absolutely.
I can demonstrate radical candor with empathy also, but sometimes we kind of take. But you're right, because this younger workforce always look up to a mentor kind of a relationship more than a manager, and I think that's the shoes we need to fill in. And there's a lot of research on competencies needed to manage millennial or a Gen Z. There's a lot of research out there, but the primary 2-3 things if I have to say is that they're always socially conscious. So again, talking about the value the organization is creating, CSR and everything always sells well with them. So always take that message. Second is take a mentor kind of a position and always keep see span of attention, right? And we're all also guilty of it. Every 10-30 seconds look at the phone. So span of attention is very small. So we need to keep reminding them the bigger picture. You're doing this because for the customer, because for the organization, because for your own career. Keep reinforcing that. And then the third is find those moments, mentoring or coaching moments, where you kind of give them some guidance on the upskilling, reskilling, metaskilling. And if you do those consistently, you'll be able to very well retain the younger workforce and connect with them a lot.
Super. Nilanjan, over to you. We have a few minutes to start winding down, and can take a couple of questions.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. I think Anil, I think a couple of questions, but something that I thought I will, and maybe it's a little transactional, but let me kind of stick my neck out and still ask that. We're talking about learning. We're talking about training at scale. Like, how do you train at scale? But if I just flip the question to saying that if you have to help lot of people to learn at scale, if you've got such large, kind of people who are joining your company every year, and people who are already, your headcount is fairly large. So how do you help people learn at scale at CGI, and yet make the experience very engaging? What is if there is one quick trick of the trade that you want to suggest to all of us?
No, that's a great question, and that's a great one. Technology like LMS and LXPs, and also using person-driven curated learning. So to give an example, last year was a big focus on reskilling for our organization during pandemic. So we actually curated 40 hours of content on, we call it digital foundation. So it doesn't matter who you are in the organization. If you take this course, take this certification, you have the foundations of emerging skills. Then you can branch out to AI, ML, or whichever area you want to. So I think the trick is taking this content and having a good, as much as possible, a learning technology, LMS or LXP, which has a good UI UX. That's the trick. And what I've also realized is we are still humans, right? We still need human connect. So just giving a self-paced online content is good, but doesn't satisfy everybody's need. So once a month, throw in a master class. You bring in a senior leader or a external guest speaker who kind of face to the program. So self-curated, self-paced online content. Do learning at your own pace, and use multiple modalities like video, quizzes, throw in master classes once a while, and most importantly incentivize them through badges, and that's worked really well. And last year we launched our own LXP platform, actually a year back, exactly a year back as we speak. And in last 1 year, we just in India we had over 300,000 badges, even for the vendor platform who we implemented. So I think the whole micro credentialing approach, and people, even without we telling them, they started flaunting and showing this off in LinkedIn, which was a good thing to see. Adds to the brand of the organization, right? Consisting in the, so I think it's a combination of those three. In a why this is important. So the whole curated learning program we did was said, we will make you future ready, and that was very significant move from CGI saying, in the year of pandemic, we want to invest in your future readiness, and that kind of sat really well with our employees at all levels, especially younger ones, and they completed as we speak. More than one third of our workforce in India has completed the program and is certified. So
Great. And I think another question that we have from the audience, I think they're all kind of seriously appreciating all your lovely examples, Anil. One question that is coming out is, what message do you have for learners today as a key component towards sustainable careers?
yeah, I think this is something I think for myself. I think you have to be selfish. Everything is changing so fast. Be selfish, invest in yourself, find the right balance of what are your upskilling, reskilling, and meta skilling needs. Especially, see, meta skills, the other way to use the word meta skill is lifelong habits. You have the right lifelong habits of building emotional intelligence, building resilience. Last whole year tested resilience for all of us, even now, right? uh, Learning how to learn. I personally have enrolled in a couple of courses. The course Learning How to Learn. There's a famous book also out there. I know you guys have a equivalent course. I've gone through your content too, which is equally good. I've not just gone through the course, but actually trying to form a habit. You know, I think personal mastery is a be selfish and pick 2-3 areas where you want to create habits out of personal mastery. For me, it's about learning how to learn, and then second is being agile, and third is this whole piece around self-awareness, and which is part of emotional intelligence, right? Being mindful and self-aware are the three meta skills I'm consciously practicing, and it takes a couple of years, right? So I've been a meditation practitioner for almost 10 years, but still that's something I continue doing. And now I just realized that what has started as my personal belief system is also helping me in my career in a post-COVID world. So I think be selfish, pick 2-3 areas of personal mastery, and create habit cycles out of it. It takes time, but and that's where if you want, get a mentor, get a coach, or form a group of like-minded people in your organization, outside the organization, doesn't matter. But I think that's the only advice I would give you.
Super. No, thanks. I think it's been wonderful. And Anil, I think, just over the last 1 hour, from you, we've got pearls of wisdom as always. I think the one, 2 or 3 things that I kind of take back. One, the whole paradigm around upskilling, reskilling, and meta skilling. I think that's kind of really wonderful. The whole thing about private, personal, and public leadership. I think that sounds, really awesome. I mean, it's just the way you communicate out, your internal image, your interpersonal image, and your external image, and how all three of them really kind of sync with one another. I think that's really wonderful. But I think the one thing that I really take back, which is the whole thing about you use the word unselfish, and how in an unselfish way you can build young talent, and it may not be just restricted to what you're doing at CGI, but it's an industry-wide supply chain that you are creating. And I think, I mean, I can't personally tell you how excited I am hearing about flipped classrooms. So, but
yeah, I know the role you played in that too, so I can understand.
Yeah, thanks for that. But I think I'm so excited. But thanks for this. I think this has been wonderful, Shreyasi and Anil. I think so delighted to be really facilitating this. It was very open, very authentic, very, very transparent. And therefore, thank you to both of you. I would also like to thank the audience for joining in for the first Thrive Talk session. Before we close, I would like to request Shreyasi and Anil to pose quickly for a virtual selfie.
Oh, how do we do that? These are all. And sorry, I think we've not been able to take a couple of questions, but to the participants can write to Anil, and I'm sure that he'll be able to respond. And one around sports training is fantastic as a question that we can take up. How do we pose for the selfie?
Yeah, trust me, technically so poor I am. I'm also trying to kind of figure out, but maybe Santha and Mehak, can you help?
We just do that. We'll just make like a funny face and there'll be a screenshot.
Yes.
Okay, that's
Okay.
what. Okay,
All
so
right.
I'll do Harappa. Anil, you can also do Harappa because you can't do CGI. I don't know how you will do that.
Yeah.
So how do you do Harappa? If you could.
Like the two brackets.
Here like this.
Okay, let's do that. Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
Cool.
You should
Thanks.
You should hear a click at least, but I think it's done. We've got it, Harappa team, right?
Yes, done. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Anil. Thank you so much for joining us. And what a fascinating conversation. We could have kept chatting.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the conversation. I think these are some real challenges we're facing as an industry. And what I really appreciate about what Harappa is doing is we need to have an ongoing narrative around these topics. And thanks to Thrive Talks, keep the engagement on, keep the narrative on, because narrative leads to change, and change is for betterment. So yeah, I really appreciate that effort from you guys here.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for joining. And thanks to the Harappa team.